Why, hello there. To receive each episode of Sacred Symbols 3 days earlier than the public, totally ad-free. To have your questions, comments, and concerns read on the air. To hear your name in the end credits, and to score other cool perks. Please consider supporting this show on Patreon at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. Not only will your subscription net you benefits for Sacred Symbols and allow this show to continue into the future, but those benefits also carry over to other CLS shows too, including the video game-centric YouTube show SideQuest, the retro and nostalgia-themed podcast Knockback, and the eclectic interview series Fireside Chats. In other words, you're getting insane bang for your buck. Again, that's patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. Without you, Sacred Symbols and CLS couldn't and wouldn't exist. Now, on to the show. Greetings and salutations.
Yeehaw,
oh
partner.
My God. Holy moly.
It's a Red Dead Redemption
Oh
cast.
my God. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I know. You gotta be surprising.
Well,
Gotta keep people on their toes every now and then.
I know. I didn't anticipate that. I didn't anticipate that at all. Chris, welcome to the apartment. You're here on a Thursday. You're usually not here on a Thursday, but we're recording Sacred Symbols, Red Dead Redemption 2, Spoilercast as promised.
Yeah.
Yeehaw Partners is right. It's a really great game.
It's certainly something.
I've been talking somewhat flippantly, but not completely so, that Detroit Become Human is my game of the year.
Yeah.
And I really love that game. I would really have to sit down and think about what my game of the year is at this point. I think Detroit would be one of them, but man, Red Dead Redemption 2, Rockstar's Red Dead Redemption 2, which just came out a couple weeks ago, by the time I think the patrons will hear this, is out, and I love it. I'm kind of enamored with it.
Yeah, I'm thoroughly impressed by this game in a way that I probably haven't been impressed by a game in a long time. I think maybe Gears of War 1 graphically was like the last time I was like, whoa, this feels like a next-gen game. I think this to me is like that point in time again where it's like this feels very much a step forward from other open-world games. It's got a lot of problems, and I'm sure we'll probably get into it. But as a package, man, there's a lot to the value proposition here.
That's exactly right. I think that in the past, I've complained that games can be too big. They can be too broad. There can be too much in them. I know that that's kind of in the eye of the beholder with a lot of people. And I know that as a younger gamer, when I was younger and when you were younger, that we used to only be able to afford a few games a year or be able to rent games. And so we wanted as much bang for our buck as possible. And I remember playing games like Grand Theft Auto 3 when I was a senior in high school, and other games like that where I'm like, wow, I can really spend 2 months with this game or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I try to look at it through that lens and try to optically see it for what it is for most people, which is, like you said, value proposition. That this game, I think, could justify a $100 price tag. And I think that the last third of the game or so, and we can get into that, could have very easily been DLC, and no one would have been upset about it if they just didn't have already included it. So I give them a lot of credit for that because, well, let me back up so that people know what they're getting into. We're going to spoil the shit out of Red Dead Redemption 2. If you didn't play the game yet and you don't care, that's cool. But if you're still working your way through the game and you do care, I would shut the game or the podcast off at this point. Don't shut the game off, but shut the podcast off and then come back. It'll be here in your feed, whether you listen to it in a month or a year. It'll still be here, unless there's an EMP that goes off over the United States or something.
We're going to make an effort to do that this time because I know a lot of people we didn't really do that at all for our Spider-Man Spoilercast, so we're going to actually make an effort here.
Right, exactly. What Chris is saying, and it's my fault really because I'm the one who organizes the show, is that we did a Spoilercast for Spider-Man back in like late September, early October that people enjoyed, but the common complaint about it, as Chris said, was that we didn't really spoil it per se. We didn't go into our thoughts on the story and the characters. And a lot of that was because I wanted to structure it entirely around inquiries from our audience. And as you guys know, if you support the show on patreon.com/ColinsLastStand, you get ad-free early access to every episode, including this one that you're listening to now. And it's the only way to interact with the show. And we got almost 100 inquiries about Red Dead Redemption 2 on Patreon. I've whittled it down to 24, and I've put them into 5 categories. I don't know if we're going to get to all of them.
Right.
But what I'm trying to say, Chris, is that I've tried to be more organized this time because I think that was a valid complaint. So before we get into the gameplay, before we get into all that kind of stuff, I'm just curious, from a broad perspective, what are your thoughts on the story of Red Dead Redemption 2? Because I think if you're not engaged with the story of it, then there's probably no real reason to play it. I don't think it's like Grand Theft Auto in that sense. I don't think that there's like a lot of playability here if you're not engaged in the story in the world.
I loved it. I had the time of my life in this game, and it's weird because like I'm not particularly a big fan of Westerns at all. Like I like maybe The Hateful Eight. or like a Tarantino Western or like stuff like that. But it's like cowboys have always been this thing that I was like, this isn't at all interesting to me. I want to see like aliens and stuff. But we've had enough of aliens, I feel like.
Right.
The narrative is super strong here. I wasn't expecting to like Arthur as much as I ended up really, really liking him. And that's a testament, I think, because this could have easily failed. Like, I can't imagine any other studio doing this story particularly well.
I agree.
Nuts.
It's because it's so broad. And like I said, it's really multiple games worth of stories. And obviously, it's a prequel to 2010's Red Dead Redemption and actually leads in the ending pretty much directly into what you would probably consider the prologue of that game, as, you know, the cops and the Pinkertons are kind of eyeing John Marston as a way to get to Dutch van der Linde, which is kind of what, you know, in a broad way, the original Red Dead Redemption is about. And you had played the original, right? Before, and leading up to this, you had never played it before?
I played it recently for the first time. I haven't finished it yet, but it's fresh in my mind, and the ending of this game really actually, it beautifully segues into it, especially because it's so fresh in my head that, like, wow. And suddenly all these characters that I was looking at in like a really weird lens where it's like, I don't know about this character. Suddenly, Dutch is an incredible character. Whereas before it was just like, I don't know, he's just this guy. They flesh out so many of the characters in Red Dead 1 so beautifully, retroactively. I don't know how they did that. It's insane.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's weird too for me, Chris, because I played Red Dead at the time and haven't played it since. So I'm a little kind of vague on it on a beat to beat level. But basically, and I think you'd say that this was fair, it's basically about John Marston, who's a character in the game whose spoilers you play about the last third of the game as.
Yeah.
And it's about how he's trying to get away from his life of crime, and he's living kind of a secret identity, and the federal authorities kind of identify him and basically threaten him to get involved in finding this other person who happens to be Dutch, who's the kind of, you know, antagonist in the Red Dead Redemption 2 or whatever. And that's kind of a circuitous way about how we get to Red Dead. Is that a fair synopsis of it?
Yeah, I think so.
So we're not going to cover the original game here. You guys should go play it and enjoy it at your leisure. And I don't think you necessarily have had to have played the original to enjoy this, but I think you get way more out of it. There's a ton of characters in this one that are in the original as well.
I'm actually super happy that I ended up waiting this long to play it, because I haven't finished the original Red Dead. So I feel like I have a sequel to this game to go through, which is great.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's fun. All right, so let me set the stage for what this game is about broadly, and then we can get into the story and how we feel about it. The game takes place in 1899, turn of the century. It takes place in the West and a little bit in the South. So it takes place over 5 fictional states. 2 of them, I think, are in the original Red Dead. West Elizabeth, I think, is one of them. But it's basically, if you guys can think about, a huge span of land, probably from New Mexico-ish and Texas, a little bit of, I think, Western Louisiana, up towards, you know, Colorado, Nebraska, stuff like that. I think that's kind of the generality. I did a little research to see if I can find if Rockstar ever talked about the exact analogs of what each state is supposed to be, and I'm a little confused why they didn't just use real states. But nonetheless, that's kind of the area. It's a little bit of a bigger area. It's actually, you know, 2.5 times bigger, I think, than the original Red Dead. And it takes place after a botched raid in a place called Blackwater. Blackwater plays prominently later on in Red Dead. And the Dutch van der Linde gang, of which your character, Arthur Morgan, and John Marston, the protagonist of the original Red Dead, are part of this gang. The raid goes wrong on this ferry boat, I think, and they escape with their lives, but the money's back in Blackwater, and it's basically about them trying to figure out how to survive, how to evade the authorities, and accumulate enough money to hopefully get out of the country, because their way of life, their gunslinging sort of eat or be eaten outlaw kind of situation, that was very much common in the post-Civil War era. You know, in my review of the game, Chris, I talked a little bit about how we have to think about how, even though we can't identify with or sympathize with them necessarily, that people that were going to the frontier and that were going west were crazy. Like, the government sent people to their death, basically, promising them land and gold and promises of all these things, and little cities propped up like San Francisco and all of that. But it's no surprise that a generation or two removed from that, people are kind of lost because civilization has caught up with them, but they're still the same. Yeah. And that's basically what the story is about. Do you think that that's a fair synopsis of?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think that's one of the most interesting parts of it, honestly. Like, even behind all the like actual narrative, behind just like the character interactions, I think the broader theme of the West coming to an end is a really interesting time period to explore, especially from just like from a gameplay perspective.
Absolutely.
I thought it was neat. I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit.
No, please.
I thought it was neat that when you got to Saint Denis, which is like kind of like more or less the most advanced city you're going to find in this game, that you felt really claustrophobic in it and you couldn't really maneuver your horse around as well. And every time you would try to cut through like a building, there'd be like locked gates. And it feels really restrictive as a cowboy. And you're like, man, I really hate the city. And it's like, oh yeah, they don't like the city either.
Right. It almost seems like by design.
Yeah.
That, the opulence, they have electric lights
Yeah.
and telegraph wires and all these things and built up 3-4 story buildings. But yeah, very confined and claustrophobic as opposed to Strawberry and some of the other settlements that, Rhodes, some of the other settlements that you encounter in the game. That's an absolutely great point. So talk to me a little bit about how you feel about Arthur Morgan. Because Arthur Morgan, to me, he's the protagonist of the game. He is a very sympathetic, likable, endearing character, and the way that the game treats him towards the end, he gets tuberculosis and ends up basically dying.
Yeah.
Adds a real hopeless slant to the game and makes more sense why you'd play as John Marston, I guess, in the last third or so. Maybe I'm being a little generous with that. Maybe it's like the last fifth. I don't know. But I'm curious what you think about Arthur Morgan, the protagonist.
No, yeah, I really liked him a lot. I thought his relationship with that Mary Linton character that she shows up, she's like an ex, I guess, and she shows up every now and then. It gives you like a real insight into this dude who's just like, who actually had like a life before this, and now he's just like a complete mess. And he's really shockingly relatable for somebody that I actually can't relate to at all. It's weird.
It's because he has this heart of gold in a way. There's a dissonance.
He's really sarcastic too.
Yeah, he's sarcastic. He's dry. But for me, there's just the detachment, and I think we can get into this in the gameplay when we talk about gameplay, because I think that that's kind of where the game falls apart a little bit. But there's a detachment between the way these guys carry themselves. They carry themselves by a code. They seem to be honorable. They live within this band of kind of dissidents and random people that kind of all contribute some different things. Really cool look into a band of outlaws, I guess, and how they all fell in with each other and all protect each other. It's very much, all for one and one for all. But there's something about him where he's incredibly and inherently violent, but struggles and wants to get out of the violence. And obviously that's the overarching theme of Red Dead 2 is East meets West, old meets new, violence meets order, justice meets whatever, you know, and how they struggle with that.
Yeah, I thought the tuberculosis angle was particularly interesting because I thought it was a very clever way of having this character kind of speed along a character progression in a very natural way. Because, like, obviously, if you find out you got time limited, it's like, yeah, I might as well just follow what I think, because I'm not going to be around. I'm not going to get this money. The money that my gang is accumulating isn't going to go to me. I'm dead. I thought it made, like, a really good amount of sense for him to just kind of explore that change in character that happens toward the end, where he starts to really oppose Dutch and starts being more vocal and starts actually genuinely trying to tell people to get out of the gang. I thought that was, like, a pretty clever way of doing that.
It was, and it was sad, too, because like many anti-heroes, right? Your Tony Sopranos. I most recently watched Ozark, which is, really kind of about bad people.
Walter White.
Walter White, exactly. Where, even Don Draper and these guys, where it's like these guys are kind of scumbags, but you root for them and you want good things from them. And so it's not super uncommon in fiction anymore, but I liked that angle as well. That, I'm playing as a bad guy. I'm playing as a mass murderer, basically.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it gets a little over the top in that regard. And I think that that's a design flaw that I'd like to get into. But it's funny how it makes you sympathize with them and their plight. And, I even sympathized a little bit with Dutch because...
Yeah, especially at the beginning.
Yeah. Dutch Vanderlyn, for people that don't know or, need a refresher, Dutch Vanderlyn, again, is kind of the antagonist. But he's the leader of the Vanderlyn gang that's named after him. And obviously plays a prominent role in Red Dead Redemption, the 2010 original. But it seems like it's a descent into madness for him, but you can't really identify if he believes his own hype or not. If he really believes that the next score, I tweeted out a funny joke that someone had been tweeting around. It was a GoFundMe page for Dutch Vanderlyn where it says, I have a plan.
I just need money.
Yeah, where she basically says, and it gets a little ridiculous over and over again when it's like, he's got one more plan, he needs one more score. But there's something deeply sympathetic about him, even though he turns on everyone and kind of goes mad. And is responsible for the near death of John Marston, is responsible for the death of some of the beloved members of the gang. I kind of felt for him too, because he's like in a rock and a hard place and simply refuses to relinquish control of a life that does not exist anymore, which is very much prominent in 2010's Red Dead.
To be fair, he becomes the antagonist. I think at the beginning it's very much unless you play the original Red Dead, I don't think you get the sense that he's going to become a bad guy, and it happens very naturally and very like slow. The pacing of this game is very slow, and that I think is going to turn a lot of people off. But I thought it actually worked wonders because it's very authentically Western. It's very authentically Western to have these slow build-ups, and maybe there's not like, it's not like Grand Theft Auto where like the trailer's gonna be like just machine guns and like flying into a bank from like skydiving onto a bank from a helicopter, you know? Like the beginning of the game is almost like the Hateful Eight, where it's a very slow process. You're moving through the snow very slowly. It's very deliberate, and I wonder if that's gonna turn a lot of people off. Because I feel like it probably could.
I think it will. And I want to get into some of these questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas that were submitted by our Patrons at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. Remember, this is true for all episodes of Sacred Symbols. We do a normal episode of Sacred Symbols every week. This is kind of a special episode we wanted to do just for you. But this is the only way you can interact with the show, and we appreciate when you guys do. We got almost 100 entrants. I selected 24. I don't know if we're going to get to all of them, but let's see what they had to say, Chris. Tony Colton wrote into us and said, "Hey guys, so my biggest issue with GTA 5 was that the story didn't keep me engaged and I lost interest and never finished the game." That actually happened to me as well. Do you think RDR 2 suffers the same fate, or in your opinion, is the story better at getting its hooks into you? How do you feel about this? Because for me, it did feel slow and plodding at times, and I think that that's to its detriment. But I also try to keep in mind this factoid that most people will not be affected by, which is that I felt a little bit of pressure to finish the game.
I was gonna say something like that, where it's like there were points where I was like, oh my god, this is taking so long, but it's only because I knew that I had to finish it by a certain time.
Right.
Whereas I don't think I would have really felt that, like, because I really like the slow pace, especially in the beginning, because I just think it fits the tone and it fits the universe that they've built for this game. But yeah, that pressure to finish was certainly something that
and it's a little unique for you because this is not something you've ever or rarely been up against in your nascent gaming career. As we do Sacred Symbols, hopefully for a long time to come, you'll get more used to it. But I did try to combat that, and you and I actually had an interesting conversation about it, where I was like, I don't want our show to be defined by playing things to play them or to play things quickly, because I think that that's the definition of many big sites and many bigger podcasts, and I don't want anything to do with that. And I'm glad we gave ourselves an extra week. And what's funny about that is even with the extra week, I just finished it 12 hours ago as the time we're recording this. It's a big game.
It's a big game, man. It's nuts. How many lines of dialogue in there? Like 500,000 something lines of dialogue?
I think if they said, if you printed it all out on paper, it would go like 12 or 14 feet high or something like that.
That's horrifying.
And that was all written by just, a team of 20 people or so, according to the credits, which were also lengthy. I think I watched the ending for 45 minutes or something like that. I think that's how long the ending is, by the way. It's incredibly long, which is cool.
But there's story in there, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, because that's when they take the time to kind of connect the dots between the games, which is cool, or really kind of more intimately connect the dots. But to his kind of more inquiry, I think that there's just something stronger here. I don't know that I was ever, since the PS2 days, a massive Grand Theft Auto fan. I liked Grand Theft Auto 4 just fine, and I liked Grand Theft Auto 5. I just never really played it very deeply. I liked more playing and fucking around with it, which, like I said earlier, this is not really a game that. You're not going to spawn a rocket launcher and see how long you can survive against the cops. You can...
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, Grand Theft Auto is more of a sandbox, I would say, and this is more of a sim. I would argue there's a lot of simulation aspects of this game that I don't think necessarily would lend itself well to... Hey, let's just pop in some Red Dead. No one's going to do that. I mean, the online's coming, so who knows?
Right, and the online, what I thought was interesting about that, too, is that the online stuff is all credited in the credits already, so I just found that interesting.
Yeah, it's got trophies.
Yeah, exactly. The trophies are there. People are already glitching the trophy, so people have the Platinum Trophy. Thank you for that. And so, yeah, I think that it's different. I think that, in my opinion, this is not going to sell as well. I think we're going to talk about that later. It won't do Grand Theft Auto numbers, but this game is better than any Rockstar game I've ever played, and I've played most of them. All of the Grand Theft Auto games, both Manhunts, State of Emergency, like all the big ones. And I just feel like this, and the original Red Dead, which I thought was great, but this game is such an amazing experience that I think you got to give it time, and you got to play, even if it takes you months, even if you're just playing it a couple hours a week, as you kind of go through your quicker experiences, your Spyros and your Hitmans and all that. I still think that this is a game that is deliberately designed to suck you in. And there is no hour counter as far as I can tell. I couldn't find a time counter in the game, which annoys me a little bit. But I assume I spent no less than 70 hours playing the game, and it probably is more than that.
this is a benchmark game, I think, for this generation especially. And the thing is, it's like I've played a lot of Grand Theft Auto games. A lot of the times I've just been very disengaged because I just don't care about what's going on. I didn't really like Grand Theft Auto 4 outside of like the sandbox nature of it. Same thing with Grand Theft Auto 5. Back when Red Dead came out, I didn't touch it just because it was like, it's just Grand Theft Auto with horses. That's what I thought at the time. And this is without a doubt the only Rockstar game I've finished ever. Like front to back.
Not even the old GTAs or anything?
Not even the old GTAs. Because the old GTAs I would play and I was like, I'm just going to mess around. I'm just going to put cheat codes in it.
Right.
Because that's where the fun of those games are. But like, I think the fun in this game is not necessarily just like balls to the wall kind of fun in the way that you think about it. The fun is kind of being sucked into it and being immersed in this world that you didn't think that you would get quite sucked into.
Right. I agree. Brandon Hardman wrote into us, no relationship to Mega Man 3's Hardman, as far as I know. Says, for the last few days, I haven't advanced the story in this game at all. I've literally just been hunting and fishing to upgrade my satchels and whatnot. Did you guys have any similar experiences where you got lost in the minutiae of the game and completely forgot about the main story? It happened all the time, especially early on. I got to be honest with you, I stopped fucking around so much, again, to the point
for the
where
time crunch.
When we had to get through. But when I had the game before it came out, I sat and played dominoes and poker and blackjack for probably a cumulative 5 hours of my life. Just the money's not worth it. It's a little annoying with the animations and stuff, but I found myself doing little things like that and just listening to what everyone's saying. And it felt so vibrant and so alive. I feel like you almost do yourself a disservice by just playing beat to beat, because obviously on the HUD and on the map, yellow icons indicate story missions, white icons indicate kind of side quests, and just advancing just by going to the yellow ones, I would assume that would still take you 50 hours even if you did just that. But that's not the way I would recommend playing this game. In fact, I would recommend the exact opposite. Go do everything else, and then once it's all cleared, then you go to the yellow marker. That's how I played it.
Yeah, I would recommend not playing like you're on a time crunch is basically how I would say. Just like do what you feel like doing, because the game paces itself, I think, actually pretty well. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of random encounters that you come across. There was a guy that I came across on the road who was like cleaning his horse, and the horse like kicked him in the head and he died, and it just ran away. I was like, okay, that's a thing that just happened. There's this woman who was chained into an outhouse. She looks like she's inbred and her family was like ashamed of her, so they locked her in the outhouse. And then when the game ends, you go back to the lighthouse and she's dead, and she's like a skeleton. And it's like there's a lot of interesting little things that aren't even necessarily story missions that I was really engaged by. There's UFOs that you can find if you find like a particular house. There's the KKK.
The KKK's in there, yeah.
And they always kill themselves accidentally, which I thought was hilarious.
I didn't see the UFO thing.
You didn't see the UFO?
No.
There's this house there's this like abandoned, I happened to cross it, where it's like there's this house with like a letter in it that said, it was a bunch of like dead people in their beds like chained together wearing shoes, like matching shoes. And then there was a note that said like come back at 2 a.m. or whatever, something like that. And then I made a note to do that. And there's like a UFO that like hovers over the thing for a little bit. It's really,
oh wow,
yeah. There's a lot of weird stuff.
That's cool.
That you can totally miss.
It's wild, man. Because even in looking at the granular kind of checklist that the game puts in there for you, because you basically have two different completion levels. You have your story completion, which was at 100, and then your overall completion. I think I beat the game around 81.5% or something like that. And there's just all of these things where it's like hideouts and finding fossils. Did you find the paleontologist that I was telling you?
I did find the paleontologist.
Yeah, I didn't do anything for her, but I found her.
No, I found a mammoth.
Oh, you did? You found some bones?
I found a mammoth by chance, but I didn't really seek them out.
It's just funny how there's just so much deliberate design. And even based on the day-night cycle, not necessarily unusual. You see that in Fallout, you see that in Skyrim and stuff like that. But the day-night cycle kind of affecting what's available to do, what's available for you to go into, if you can shop, if you can interact with certain people. You can obviously go to the saloon at night, get bombed, take a bath with a hand job. Chris contests that he's not getting a hand job.
Can I say also the fact that every clock is time accurate is insane. The clocks are all in sync throughout the entire game, which is like weird to me. I don't know why that impressed me, but it did. And the map is huge, and it's full of things, like full of events, full of crescendos, full of story, full of missions, full of strangers to meet. This map and in this game feels more alive to me than a lot of RPGs do, which is insane to me.
I mean, I will say without a shadow of a doubt, Chris, that this game is more alive and more vibrant and more believable than any game and any world I've ever existed in before. And, we complain about that. You're not a JRPG nerd like I am, but it's always been a complaint that these worlds don't feel populated. You go into a town in
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII, there'd be like 15 people living there. It's like there's a total world population of 300 or something like
Yeah.
that. You don't feel that in this because even Erin, my girlfriend, was watching me play and she'd be like, well, what is this person doing? Why is this person driving this wagon here and all this? And I'm like, they're just presumably living a life. It's an NPC, but they're living a life. And I think it's an amazing thing. You never know what you're going to encounter. Like you said, you never know what you're going to encounter on the side of the road. You're never going to know who you're going to help and how that might have ramifications for you later on. And so I think it's fun.
Like you help some dude out of a bear trap, and then like 50 hours later, he recognizes you when you walk into a town. He's like, hey, buy a gun from the gun shop. It's on me. I'm like, what? I don't even remember you.
How's your leg?
Yeah, how are you walking?
Moise Khan wrote into us and said, while the main story is engaging and interesting, another aspect of the game that really impressed me was your camp and its inhabitants. Other games have had hubs and social spaces, but Rockstar made a damn near perfect community that feels alive. Aside from doing mundane chores like chopping wood and moving sacks, I found the activities you get to do with the wide cast of characters like fishing, hunting, and thieving truly exquisite, often revealing tidbits about them you wouldn't have known otherwise. Did either of you ever find yourself ignoring the main story missions and just do stuff around the camp for longer than expected? I definitely did early on, although I realized that I missed a lot of missions that are time sensitive based on the chapter you're in, because eventually your camp keeps moving and then you don't have a camp anymore. Then you're not even playing as Arthur Morgan. So there's an ability to miss a bunch of stuff, which I did, unfortunately. And like you have to go get someone a pipe. But I did like how you can walk around the camp and just hold L2 and engage in conversations, and that some of them, especially the women in the camp, they would try to ask if you wanted to get anything off your chest or go talk, and you go sit with them
it's like
and just
therapy sessions.
It's just awesome. Like, it was just, I would really say that while every game has something you can miss, every game has something you don't have to see. I think that's even true in the most linear games, whether it's a little Easter egg or whatever the case might be. I would say most of this game I probably didn't experience, which is really an incredible thing to say for a game that took 70 hours of my life away.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that they were willing to do that, because I feel like a lot of studios would be really really put off by that idea. The idea that like, oh hey, we made this, we want everybody to experience it, and that kind of leads to everybody kind of having the same experience, and it kind of leads to things being a little uninteresting. So the fact that you can in fact miss some pretty big things, I think is awesome. I think we're seeing less of that, sadly.
I agree, because it adds weight and consequence to the experience and makes you think about it. And I understand, and I've been there, where you get mad that you missed something in a game, whether it's tethered to trophies or more likely tethered for most normal people, unlike me, tethered to just experiencing the entire thing, where if you look at trophy guides online, it's always like, are there missable trophies? Can you miss things? And games, as you were saying, have whittled that down out of existence almost, because it annoys the shit out of people. But this game doesn't care, and I like that. This game is literally like, things are going to happen. You're going to get your own unique experience. And I think that that's what's so fun about it. We've already talked in this brief time about having our unique experience, as opposed to when we play Uncharted, great game, but we're going to have the same experience, even with Uncharted 4's ridiculous choice sequences, which were dumb. That made it seem like anything you said mattered. You and I are having the same experience. We're seeing the same enemies. We're seeing the same beats. It's the same set pieces. It's the same everything, but
It's the same cutscenes.
Right, exactly. But with Red
even
Dead,
in this one, it's like there's like 4 different endings.
Is there?
Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
How did you die?
I died. Well, I didn't know that at all. So I died. I was in the mountains, in the snowy mountains. I was fighting. John Marston gets away. TB's kind of overtaking me. And then I think Micah and Dutch presumably leave me for dead.
They left you, right?
Yeah.
So you had a good honor level.
Yes, I had a good honor.
Yeah, me too. I looked it up just because I was curious as to what the other endings are. My God. If you have a bad honor level, things get real fucked. It's real sad.
What happens?
Well, one of them is Micah just shoots you right through the head in the mid-sentence. Another one, he stabs you in the back and leaves you, if you go get the money instead of helping John escape. Micah just stabs you in the back and just leaves you there. I thought it was really nice that the good ending is you just kind of peacefully kind of passing away watching the sunset. I thought it was like, man, it's so good.
I had I didn't even think about looking that up. Although I guess that goes to what I was saying, though.
I was just super curious.
I believe that, you know. But what's cool about it is it always reminds me, well, it's a very different game, but Journey is like one of my favorite games on PS3. And what I loved about it was that everyone just got something out of it. Like, it made me profoundly sad. It made me cry. I have no idea why. As you're ascending the mountain at the end of the game, I'm like hysterical crying. And
there's a bunch of games that have like weird, like tangent. There's a moment in BioShock Infinite where you play the guitar in like a cellar somewhere.
Yeah.
And I remember crying at that for some reason. Like I teared up. I was like, why? Why do I care about this?
Another optional moment in that game that you never had to experience.
Exactly.
And for me, I look at Red Dead in a similar way to Journey, where I'm like, that was my experience. Like, I refuse to ever play Journey again. A lot of people went back and got the trophies and did. I'm like, no, that was something else, man. I'll never forget that. And with this, it's cool to know that it ended in a different way, but I like to think that, my Arthur Morgan played honorably and died. I don't want to say peacefully. I don't think dying of tuberculosis is peaceful.
Well,
but
I mean,
but
compared
peaceful,
to getting shot in the head or like stabbed in the back and left to bleed out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Justin wrote into us, though, and he has an interesting take here. I wanted to read this out. He says, "Howdy, boys. I'm finding that the strict linearity of the story missions in RDR2 have been sucking some of the fun out of my experience with the game so far. Here's an example. In one of the earliest missions after the crew robs a train, Dutch instructs Arthur to get rid of the survivors however he sees fit. I took the opportunity to experiment, so I tied one of the men up and plopped him in front of the train, put another on the back of my horse, and left the third safe inside the train. Then I started the train up and nothing happened. The men disappeared and my actions were ignored, the fate of the men up in the air. Now I know I did something extremely edge-casey and it'd be impossible to have Rockstar account for every possible player decision, but I can't help but feel that to some degree, that this is an area where Rockstar has refused to grow with the rest of the genre, most likely due to their dedication to telling a cohesive story. The game, for all its expert world crafting, still follows the same cookie-cutter formula that Rockstar has been using for years. Have you guys been bothered at all by this? The world is so vibrant and full of detail in every interaction that, to me, the rest of the game puts a damper on the story missions, and I find myself waiting for the moment where I fail a mission and hear Dutch tell me, all you had to do was follow the damn train, Arthur." This does play into, I don't have a problem with this particular mission, I remember it, but this does play into the fact that I feel like there is something missing here in this game that I think it doesn't stop it from being an amazing game, but from my perspective, the design, the intent in how deep it is not represented in the story structure at all, because there are just not that many options. And there is a dissonance between how murderous you will have to be in the game. All right, for instance, there's a scene where I think John and Arthur are talking about how Dutch is increasingly killing people in cold blood and how he's becoming a cold-blooded killer. But I'm like, you guys just laid waste to 25 American soldiers at an Indian reservation. So what are you talking about? You have to almost separate the gameplay from the story and almost pretend that the combat sequences don't really happen. I mean, that's kind of how I extracted the most fun out of it, because I'm like, I didn't look at the counter, but I must have killed 500 people. That would make me one of the, by the way, most prolific mass murderers ever.
Yeah.
In the history of humankind.
Well, in the Rockstar universe, it doesn't seem like that's a big deal. In general, even through GTA, I mean, come on.
Did you experience a similar issue, though? Because I really wanted, I guess what I'm saying is, to his point, I wanted to play it a little more peacefully. And some people were making fun of me, being like, why would you go into a Rockstar game? And I'm like, because this game is so much better than everything else they've made and so thoughtful that I figured, like, well, can I have an option to not kill this guy? Can I have an option to not draw my gun? Can I have an option to bring this bounty in alive? Whatever the case might be, I
just didn't really experience that. I think there were points, especially towards the end, when it starts to be clear that Dutch is kind of going insane and they have a problem with how he's doing things. The dissonance came for me, not from all the murdering, but from all the obvious crimes that you were committing with no sense of cover. You know what I mean? Like, because every time you're involved in like a massive shootout, it's typically because somebody fucks up and you get fired on. Like, you're never really the one initiating anything necessarily as far as like combat goes. Very rarely. So I felt I was justified in like retaliating. But when Dutch just like slams some woman into the ground for helping him up a ladder in some Cuban island, I thought that was like, okay, didn't have to do that, dude. But like for me, it was the dissonance always came from like, you're supposed to be lying low. Why are you robbing all these people?
Need one more score.
But I guess that's Dutch though.
Go to Tahiti. Yeah,
that's Dutch. That's exactly kind of the point, I guess.
And I guess that's why you just don't know, and I still don't know. And if it is a true descent into madness, if he's crushed by the pressure of taking care of this family, basically, they look at each other as family. They've had all these experiences. If you listen to and talk to the various people, you kind of learn how they came in and when they're like kind of rookies on the team and veterans. Obviously, Arthur Morgan's like one of his lieutenants, and John Marston's kind of a little bit below that. But to me, I did have a problem with that, because I just felt like I have no problem with violence in video games. I love violent video games. It's great. It's fine. I don't care. But I just, like you said, I was playing honorably. I was helping the woman whose horse was injured back to town. I'm letting the guy out of the bear trap. I'm feeding a homeless veteran from the Civil War, and then I'm going in and killing the cops. It just doesn't make any sense.
The only time that I ever felt particularly like, I did a couple of Leopold Strauss's missions, who is he's the debt collector guy. And I did like maybe 2 or 3 of them, and I was like, I can't do this. This, for some reason, is particularly infinitely worse than mowing down all of Valentine several times.
Now, did you see the scene when he got kicked out of the camp?
No.
Okay, so
I didn't. No.
So I did all of his missions, Leopold Strauss's missions, and at some point late in the game, after Arthur's sick, he comes in and he's starting to get like tired of everything that's going on, and he literally throws him out of camp. Like he's literally like, you gotta get the fuck out of here. Like we're not doing this anymore. And like walks out, and then you hear through the grapevine, I think Sadie tells you later that Leopold Strauss was like taken by the cops and died.
Yeah, it's Charles. Charles tells you when you find him in Saint Denis.
Yeah, so like because I did all of his missions, I started getting to the point where even my character in game was like, I can't do this anymore. And actually, the last 2 debts that you go to collect, you can forgive. Like you come up with a family whose dad is dead, and you come to like some, I don't know, destitute woman or something, and you can just forgive their debts, and then you go back. I think if you do that, then you can go back and throw Leopold Strauss out of the camp.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I just totally ignored him because I was like, I can't. Like, it was like, even morally for me, I was like, I can't be doing this.
All right. So the one thing or another thing I should say, Chris, that I really want to touch on is something that actually started, I think, in some way in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which is Rockstar's kind of playing around with the realities of taking care of yourself, of sleeping, of being fit, of eating, of, resting. And that used to annoy the shit out of me in San Andreas. We had to use like the exercise bike and all. It was obnoxious.
Yeah. It annoys me in every game that I've seen it in until this one.
I was going to say the same thing. That in this one, like I wanted to bathe. Like I wanted to be clean so that in the cutscenes, I would be treated differently, because actually when I meet Bronte for one of the first times, who's the Italian mobster, I think in Saint Denis or one of those cities, one of the more affluent towns.
He's Saint Denis.
He's kind of like a proto Italian mobster. It's pretty cool. Like
I liked him a lot.
Yeah,
he was an antagonist.
Yeah, an interesting guy. Talks shit to them in Italian and then talks to them in English. And there are situations, I guess, in cutscenes where if you don't take baths or whatever, I just didn't find myself in a situation where I had bathed in a while, and they were making fun of me in that cutscene. And I don't think that that's in the normal cutscene. I think like they're like, you stink or something like that. And so after that, I was always cognizant. I'm like, I want to look my best. And that's why when Arthur Morgan got tuberculosis, he just always looked disheveled no matter how clean and well dressed he was, which annoyed me a little bit. But did you like the minutia of having to eat, of having to sleep and rest and all of those kinds of things, or did you find it frustrating? Because there were some people that just straight up ignore it, and there are statistical deficits for not sleeping, for not eating, etc.
I loved it, which was, again, a testament to the game, because this is something that would have broken a game for me. Like, I was like, I gotta brush my horse. I gotta feed my horse. I gotta pet my horse just to make sure what? This is stupid.
It would be like putting gas in your car in Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, exactly. You think about it like that, and it's like, oh my god, that's so tedious. And then you get into the game, and you realize that it has benefits, and it's not really tedious at all. It strengthens your connection with the world, I think. How many horses did you go through?
6, I think.
Jeez, man. I went through 3, and each of them crushed me. Every time I lost a horse, I was genuinely so sad. All of them. Because you spend that time bonding with them and like making them better. You can unlock like drifts and strafing techniques, and it's really cool. And you get attached to your horse, and then it just dies, and you feel horrible, which is not something I would have ever felt in like if my car gets blown up in Grand Theft Auto. I'm not gonna. All right, I'll just steal another one. It's called Grand Theft Auto, or even in Red Dead 1. I don't think I don't think I cared. Could your horse die in Red Dead 1?
I don't remember. I don't think so. That doesn't sound familiar to me. But again, it's been 8 years since I played it.
Yeah. My horse hasn't died in that one yet. But the fact that mechanic has something to show for it in that event, the fact that you actually start to care about these weird little things that you really wouldn't otherwise, it's awesome.
I think it's cool too. What I liked about the towns, especially in going into the towns, is just having these options to go to the tailor, to go to the general store and buy goods, to get ammunition and all of that, and go to the saloon and go to the barber, and there's just a lot of cool things. Go sell your hides, go sell your meat.
Even just like maintaining your weapons with gun oil to make sure they don't like jam or get broken.
It's cool. Like there's a lot of upgrades and stuff. An earlier listener question that we read was talking about upgrading your satchels and hunting and stuff. The funny thing is I didn't do any of that stuff because I barely hunted. Like there's an entire I should say multiple verticals in the game that I just barely touched. There's even a challenge list that I barely scratched. I think I did 9 of 90 challenges or something because they're sequential. And I think the compendium is 580 items or something. I think I got like 70. I just don't even understand like what I'm possibly missing here. So there is a lot of minutia in the game.
There's also perks and like talismans. They give you like weird perks that I have none of because I didn't even know about it.
I do think, and I've had this complaint about The Witcher 3 in the past, I do think that this game is straddling the line where it's like, all right, like this is too much. But unlike a lot of other games, it just makes it all optional. It clearly makes it all optional because I got through the game just fine. You know, half of my deaths were me not knowing exactly what I was supposed to do, or there was some sort of technical hiccup, like where I couldn't get on my horse for some reason or something like that, and I had to restart the checkpoint.
Right.
So it was never very nebulous about what it expected of me, even though there were all these other things I can do. Let's see what else everyone else has to say here. The Plain and Simple podcast wrote into us and said, "Howdy, boys. Do you think that Red Dead takes realism too far and in turn is sacrificing the fun factor? For example, some of my friends really dislike the fact that they can only carry one animal on their horse's back to take back to camp, or if you bump into someone, you are instantly charged with aggravated assault and are shot at by everyone in town. Others really dislike that when you open a cabinet and loot, you have to inspect every inch of the cans of beans before you put it away. Thoughts? P.S. My beard is always at a level 7. How about you guys? I was at a level 2 for both my hair and my beard.
I was clean shaven like the whole time, as often as I could be.
Very nice. Did you know that there was a interesting study in the real world that I read just yesterday, 2 days ago? They say people with beards are more handsome. Hint, Chris. Got to grow out your beard.
I'm not going to do that. I have a good jawline. I'm not going to mess
You
up.
do. You have a fantastic jawline. I'm not going to hate on your jawline at all. What do you think of this, though?
I thought it added. And I understand this point of view because, again, it's exactly the suspicion that I had before going into it. Whereas I just want my games to be fun. I don't necessarily care for these long, drawn-out intro. Like, even God of War, for me, took a little while for me to be like, oh, this is great. You know, because you start off and you're just like, you're cutting a tree down and it's like, why am I walking so slow? And you're like, oh my God, this is God of War. What's going on? But eventually, like, you learn to kind of really appreciate what the slow pace is doing and like how that actually adds to the experience. I don't think this game would be as fun without all of these little realistic, I mean, quote unquote realistic. It's not exactly realistic to get shot at for just bumping into somebody. But what I thought was interesting is even the unrealistic stuff has like this weird level of detail that you don't even think about. Like, I spent a lot of time in the earlier towns running into people and like knocking them on the ground because it was the only way that I could attack people without, you know, people shooting at me. Have you done this?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, it's hilarious. I was like, if you sprint at people, you'll just knock them over, but it won't count as like an assault.
Oh, interesting.
Unless you're in Saint Denis, where everybody is more civilized and would treat something more minor like that as like genuine aggravated assault, which is why the second you bump into anybody in Saint Denis, they run to the police, as opposed to all these little towns where they just kind of like shrug it off. I thought like that was just like an interesting detail that I think probably the majority of people probably wouldn't have picked up on. It's just full of little things like that make me appreciate it and suck me into it. And I think that's where the fun of it is. It's almost like Dungeons and Dragons in a weird way, where it's like you get sucked into, I gotta maintain my health, I gotta maintain my horse. Oh man, you're just in this world now. You're in this room now. You're not playing a game. You're like in this room now.
It's awesome. I totally agree with you. I do think that, you know, like the Grand Theft Auto games, the sensitivity of the cops or the law is a little much.
Yeah.
And it is fun watching like the people witness the assault or witness the murder and then run away, and how I had to like go and kill them or tie them up or do something to stop them. There's a lot of cool layers to that particular system, but I didn't mess around with the I would just try to escape as much as possible. I wasn't one of these guys that would try to like get into, like, there's a trophy for having a $250 bounty in all 5 states at the same time and surviving that bounty for 3 days, which is apparently really hard to do. And since you can't spawn in helicopters and rocket launchers and whatever, it's going to be harder for you to survive that particular situation. But yeah, I found the minutia, like I said earlier, I found it quite endearing. And although a lot of it wasn't well executed, or I don't want to say a lot of it wasn't well executed, a lot of it wasn't as well executed as it could have been, I think that this is a step towards an immersive world, like Chris is saying, where you just kind of exist in it and everything possible or everything you think is possible is in there, and you can take advantage of it or not to your heart's content. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and it's definitely not going to be for everybody. And I think it's a lot like a Western in that sense, where some people they'll watch a Western and they'll be like, this is slow and boring. What's going on? I'm not going to watch this. Where's the gunfights?
Right.
You know?
Right.
But I think it rewards people who have that level of patience, and it's not like a trying patience. It's just like being able to kind of enjoy the meal.
And what I think is that people are underestimating, because it's impossible to get the Platinum Trophy naturally right now because Red Dead Online is not available yet, but people are saying like it's going to take you like 200 hours to get the entire compendium, to hunt every animal, to do all that. I'm like, I think that's a conservative number. Yeah. I don't think that that's true. I think it's
way
more than
it's
that.
Definitely way more. Without a guide, especially.
Yeah, with all the challenges, and I don't know, man. Like, that's why with Rockstar games, just typically I just don't care. I'm just like, whatever. It's one of the few games where I'm like, I want to play this game. I'm not going to worry about getting the trophies.
Even just like the way that looting a body takes
what feels like ages, to me feels almost very deliberate because it's actually a risk. If you just find yourself after a shootout and you're like, oh, I need to loot stuff because why wouldn't you? You need money, you need items, you need health tonics, you need provisions. Looting a body is a commitment. And you have to weigh the options of whether or not you want to be caught by the police or by like a rival gang if they're coming back to a shootout that you just engaged in. Or if you want to just, say fuck it and like try and loot everything as quickly as possible. You just can't.
We do have a question about technical fidelity that I wanted to ask you. It's actually directed at you.
Sure.
Kyle Goodrich wrote into us and said, hey, Colin and Chris, loving the show. This question is more for Chris, as I believe he has more of an eye for it than Colin does. Do the frame rate drops, particularly when you enter towns, bother you at all? I play other games on PC quite a bit, so I know I'm spoiled to a degree, but I would swear the frame drops in the teens pretty frequently. This is really one of my main problems with the game besides the way it controls. Otherwise, I'm having a blast in the Wild West. Thanks, and keep fucking that chicken. I didn't notice anything like that.
I didn't notice any frame drops. I'm curious as to what platform you're playing on because this game is out on PS4 Pro, it is out on PS4 base, it is out on Xbox One X, and it is out on the Xbox One base. So I'd imagine that there's probably a lot of varying degrees of performance. But the fact that you're experiencing a couple of frame drops, I'd imagine I would be shocked if you were playing on a 1X or a PS4 Pro because I personally didn't experience any frame drops at all. I thought it was a very fluid experience. I don't even know what is it at 30?
Yeah, it's supposed to be locked at 30.
It's a very smooth 30. Like I don't recall it ever dipping below it. I had a couple bugs, like mostly like lighting bugs, and there was one point where I found there were these two guys who were trying to impress a woman by like putting a barrel over their head or a bottle on their head.
Oh
and,
yeah, that was a weird side quest.
Yeah, I couldn't pull out my gun, so I was just stuck looking at him. But like aside from that, like the performance is pretty solid from what I could gather.
I do want to give a shout out to those guys, by the way. You do a series of side quests for these two doofuses that are like trying to impress a girl by like beating the shit out of each other and like putting themselves in harm's way, and you shoot bottles off their heads and you beat the shit out of them and stuff like that.
I love that you could constantly shoot them on purpose. I did it like 16 times.
All right, I want to talk specifically about some of the characters because we did obviously talk about, the protagonist. We talked a little bit about the antagonist. I'm curious if any characters stick out to you. I'll throw a few out there that I really liked other than the ones that we discussed so far. I'm really quite fond of Charles Smith. Yeah. Charles Smith is a Native American. He's actually half Native, half Black, I think. Mm-hmm. And he's one of the characters that kind of sticks with you the whole time, and you actually play with John Marston as well. He seems honorable. He's mild-mannered and quiet. And I just really liked how he contrasted with everyone else and seemed honor-bound to the group, yet didn't seem to be one of them, which I liked Charles Smith quite a bit.
I liked Hosea quite a bit because he felt like just the voice of reason, even though he was still ultimately, complicit in literally everything that happened.
Right. He had some years on everyone, so he had seen more and done more.
Yeah, but you could tell that everything he was saying was correct, like the whole time, and no one would listen to him. Sadie, I really liked.
Yeah, Sadie's cool, and I wonder how realistic that was to have a female gunslinger in the late 19th century. I'm sure that happened. I'm wondering if Rockstar did this to be more inclusive. I'm not trying to even be, trying to rattle that cage at all, but I wonder if that would have been realistic, that a gang of gunslingers would have had a woman, which they don't look at in a sexual way. They don't look at in a submissive way at all. She's like one of them. Yeah. But she's also rescued by them and becomes one of them kind of rapidly. It doesn't happen quite that cleanly, of course. But I wonder how realistic that is.
Yeah. I just thought she was an interesting character. And she sticks with you through the whole game, actually. Yeah, she's with you in the beginning when you raid that cabin with Dutch as Arthur. And she's with you at the end when you, spoilers, kill Micah on top of the mountain with John Marston. So I like the Native American Rains Fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's something so tragic about that character and about like that entire portion of the game, to be quite frank.
Well, I do like that they deal with it now. They have the balls to deal with the treatment of the characters or these different kind of disparate tribes because, and I think this is going to be lost on some people, there are definitely some Civil War veterans in the game, but a lot of the veterans you meet, like the Destitute veterans, are veterans of the Indian Wars that were happening out there. And the conflict by 1899 was essentially over, like with the Apache and all these, for people that, know their history of the Sioux, like there were little bands of things happening up until the 1920s, but that was basically over. And these people were really pushed to the brink. And you deal specifically on an Indian reservation with a group of American soldiers and an honorable American officer, actually, who's trying to do right by the Indians while everyone else is doing wrong by them as they're pushing them onto different reservations and stuff. And it makes you deal with that and confront that reality of American history, which is very cool and not cool that it happened, but very cool that we get to confront that. There's a lot of real history. I noticed in the credits, the very deep and long credits for the game, that there was a team of researchers that were
that doesn't
attached to
surprise
this
me
game.
at all.
Yeah.
It's particularly well researched.
Kyle Tisdale wrote in and said, "Hey guys, what do you guys think of Arthur Morgan as a whole?" Arthur Morgan, of course, again, is our protagonist. "I was skeptical of him at first. I had a problem with his voice acting for some reason. Come on, boy.
Ah, boy.
But I'm about halfway through now, and he's become my favorite of all of Rockstar's protagonists. I found his relationship with Mary Linton, which Chris brought up earlier, and the way he acts around her especially truthful and endearing. He's also straight up hilarious at times with some really amazing dialogue. What do you guys think of Arthur, and how does he stack up with the other Rockstar heroes? From my perspective, I think he's the only protagonist in any Rockstar game that I've ever played that had actual meaning behind him.
Yeah.
You know, remember, Grand Theft Auto 3 and to an extent Vice City were totally not about you at all. CJ was a character in San Andreas, but again, not really about you. It wasn't until GTA 4 that we even had like Roman and all these guys that were actual characters you cared about, and even then, it didn't really extend to this degree for me.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think, and what's great about this game, too, is not only does it give you this great character in Arthur, it fleshes out John so well that by the time, if you ever go back to Red Dead Redemption 1, you have so much history to project onto what you're watching. It basically gives you two fantastic protagonists and makes one pretty decent protagonist from a previous game retroactively incredible.
Pedro Escobar asks us, where would you guys rank Dutch in a list of video game villains of all time? I wasn't a big fan of his from the first game, but the arc he has in this game is one of the best I've had the pleasure to experience. And he asks other questions, but we're not going to ask that. I'm curious what you think about Dutch in terms of... I don't even want to put him in terms of all-time gaming villains because he's so much more gray than that. He's not really like, an Andrew Ryan or something like that. He's or Darth Vader or something. He's gray, and I actually liked that about him. I think that he meant well until suddenly he just didn't anymore. And in that kind of environment, that hostile criminal environment where you really have to trust people, double and triple crossing and all that just eventually happens. That must just eventually happen. Yeah. Where there's money on the line and lives on the line and the law's after you and all of that. So I found him, especially at the end, I think we both got the same ending. He kind of just walks away. Yeah. He saves your life and just leaves. And you can see, at least my perspective of it was this somberness. Like, he's just like, what the and I read it as being like, what have I found myself in? Like, what is going on? And maybe even a self-awareness that he's losing his mind a little bit, Especially towards the end when everybody's double crossing, because you kind of understand why he doesn't trust people as much. You sort of understand because, like, even when you're playing as Arthur and you have this dialogue with him that's just constantly doubting him, even I'm like, yo, like, cool it. Just like, calm down. I understand this is weird, but like, I wanted Arthur to just like calm down a little bit. But even you could tell that's like just like grating on him. It's like, who's on my side? What's going on? Micah's a rat? What does that mean? Is that true? Is he lying? What's going on? And to the point where it's just like, yeah, he draws guns on both of you. And I understand. It makes perfect sense why he would just go off and start something else. I must say that I did not expect him to appear anymore in the game. I don't know why I didn't think anyone was in that cabin, but when he busted out of the cabin with his guns drawn, I was like, I didn't think that was going to happen. It was cool. Yeah. I thought I was just going to kill Micah, so it was a nice surprise. Jace Briggs asks, howdy, fellers. How did you find the slow progression of Arthur's sickness? How did it affect your view of the game once the doctor visit occurred? For me, it almost made me feel like nothing I did in the game mattered anymore, as I knew what was going to happen. Did it affect either of you in any way? It affected me in a similar way. We touched on this a little bit, but I want to get deeper into this. It affected me in the way that you brought up, that it doesn't matter for you. It matters for everyone else around you, theoretically, what you do and the actions you take. And this is specifically true with how he helps Rains Fall and Eagles Flies, I think was his son's name. Yeah, Eagle Flies. That he kind of gets involved in them. I mean, when you really get down to it, a third of the killing in the game or so is against the O'Driscoll boys and whoever else and the Skinners or whatever. But a third of the killing is against like the authorities, the cops, and a third of it, especially after you're sick, is against the U.S. military. And gets really hairy and really serious. And part of me felt a detachment from that because I'm like, this is, there is supposed to be honor amongst you guys and honor amongst thieves, and you're killing enlisted men now. And you're killing like the Pinkertons who are just high, the Pinkerton Detective Agency was real. I think that as the game got away from the crime sprees, as it were, between these groups and got into dealing more with the law and dealing more with the government, I started to feel bad for Arthur that he found himself in this situation, but he insisted on being in this situation too. And I felt bad for some of the victims, as NPC-ish and meaningless as they were. Like, for instance, I can't remember his name, but the officer that is kind of like pro-Indian or whatever that you meet, like, he has his life ruined because of them. They ruin his life. They do this to multiple people. Like, they storm that camp, and
that's true. But he also escapes because of him, because he was going to be hanged for treason.
That's true. Yeah.
So like that's the thing. It's like you are fighting against like the military in that particular point, but it's also a particular regiment of the military that's particularly horrible, and that just consistently shits all over this group of people who you understand does not deserve this. You know, especially when they burn down Rains Falls. He has like some kind of shrine, and they burned it down and just drank and got drunk off this burned shrine, and then just like left it like nothing mattered. You sort of feel like, yeah, it's the military, but there's like a lot of like villainous shit going on.
Sure.
Especially at this point in time in history when, you know, civilization is starting to crop up.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is a matter of I think many other battles and wars, conflict between the leadership and the enlisted man, and kind of what you're supposed to do in there. And obviously, as always, the enlisted man, typically the poor person or the person who can't, you know, do better for themselves in life based on the hand that they were dealt, are the ones that pay, and that's still true today. Yeah. The major thing we haven't touched on yet, Chris, as we kind of get to the end of towards the end of our spoiler cast, is gameplay. We haven't talked about the gameplay, and it's here that I think that the game suffers and isn't necessarily strong. Without auto aim, which I used liberally, and without that, and I don't know, I just am a little confused why the game doesn't feel better. There are numerous open world third-person action games that feel way better than this, and I understand that they don't want it to feel arcadey, and I get that. You don't want to feel like you're running a million miles an hour and jumping on your horse from a tree and like doing all. I get that. I don't want to play like that. I just don't understand why it feels so archaic and old. And if there's one thing about Red Dead Redemption 2 that I think it doesn't do extraordinarily well, it's in the way it feels. You know, you're walking around awkwardly, you're awkwardly waiting for interactive prompts to appear, and I killed my own horses based on, you know, poor driving or whatever, but I also think that it's jerky and kind of like a little unforgiving in that way.
Yeah.
So can you talk to me a little bit about your experience with the gameplay?
I think the shooting is probably the worst part. You know, actually trying to shoot without Deadeye or without using the auto aim is particularly difficult. I don't necessarily have that much of a problem with moving around and how kind of weighty you feel, because I think, again, that is complementary to the overall kind of realism aspect of it. And I feel about it in the same way that I feel about Resident Evil. You know how, like, you're in this mansion and you control horrendously. Resident Evil controls so awfully.
You're talking about the original.
The original one,
yes.
Yeah. But there's a bit of intent with that, because without that hindrance, there would be no tension. So there's a degree of like, yeah, this would be cooler if I could, you know, sprint like Spider-Man or something like that. But I also appreciate that it's not quite like that, that there is like a turn radius to your character, that he does have weight, that climbing through a window does take time, that all these things actually are a little bit harder to do than just pressing a button. One thing I will agree is the button prompts are a little janky. There were points when I was driving or riding. You don't drive a horse. When I was riding my horse and I would get like pulled almost to once. I don't know if you've experienced that, where you get like, especially I was coming up on a really thin bridge and I got pulled to the right, and I was like, no, I can't lose another horse.
Right.
But it's little things like that. But the fact that there are very significant issues with the gameplay, and this is still my game of the year, is, I think, speaks volumes of the product that you have here.
I absolutely agree with you there, because I am very similar to you in a gameplay is king perspective for the most part. I know a lot of people look at games like my love of Detroit, like we brought up earlier, and said like, well, there's no gameplay in that. And I'm like, well, there's actually a lot of gameplay in it. It's just not action. Yeah. So, you know, I am a 2D side scroller fan and a grueling shooter fan. And so I get all of that. And I agree with you that it is a testament to how well the game is doing everything else, that the gameplay, if the game was doing everything else as well as it did its gameplay, it would be very run-of-the-mill and mediocre. And 100%. It would have no business being that long, and no one would play it through to the end. Justin Markser wrote into us and said, "Hi, Colin and Chris. Most open-world games allow you to thrive in chaos, and your actions are typically inconsequential. In RDR2, this obviously isn't the case, as for every action, there seems to be a long-standing consequence, be it in the form of paying a bounty or having even minor crimes remembered by Westworld-esque NPCs. My question is this. Do you find hesitation in committing acts of violence in this game for logical or moral reasons, if at all? I fall into the latter category because Morgan has grown on me as a protagonist, which I personally find ironic since Dutch's gang is still very much active, whereas Red Dead Redemption's John Marston had left that life behind and had valid reasons to be as peaceful as possible. This plays a great deal into the gameplay because I found it hard, as I said earlier, to just go through the motions without finding myself in situations that I didn't want to be in. And then I couldn't artfully really do a lot of the things that I wanted to do because the gameplay just wasn't precise enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the open world, did you ever do particularly heinous things?
No, I didn't. There were times like...
I didn't rob anybody.
I never did either. I never stuck in.
I never robbed any outside of the missions where you have to, like the train robbery and stuff like that. I never pointed a gun at like a clerk or a random citizen and robbed them.
I never did it either. I don't even know what it's like to do that in the game.
Yeah, I have no idea because I felt so genuinely bad doing it.
Because the first random encounter I had in the game, I remember, is a woman whose horse broke his leg or something. Excuse me, something I hiccup there.
Yeah.
And you bring her back to town, and I realized after that, as I got, as we said earlier, I got positive karma, whatever it is, like my honor level. And I realized that I just didn't want to live a dishonorable life in the game, just to balance whatever heinous shit I was otherwise being forced to do at any given time. And again, the serious dissonance that exists there.
Yeah. I think it's hilarious, though, that, like, because in Grand Theft Auto, I didn't give a shit. I didn't give a shit about anything in Grand Theft Auto. I would do horrendous things in Grand Theft Auto all the time. But this, for some reason, I care.
Me too.
It's super weird.
How did you like dealing with your horse? Because you were talking about petting it and feeding it and stuff. Every time I would approach my horse, I would always pet it, feed it an apple or a carrot or something, and then brush it.
I loved it. I actually inexplicably really enjoyed it.
Until
I don't know why.
Even after because I had one horse that was maxed out, and that was Schmuckface the fourth, I think.
And you just put like the third in the
111 or 1.
I had different names for all of them.
And it was funny because you know how PlayStation has predictive text or whatever? It just knew that when I typed S that it wanted me to name my horse Schmuckface. So I'll just go with it.
Yeah.
So I found myself, even after maxed out, still treating it well, like still cleaning it. Yeah. And I don't know. It is funny to have that bond with that fictional animal.
It is really strange. I'm still really sad that I lost all those 3 horses. There were, what was it? It was Autismo, Clay Aiken, and my newest one who died at the end because, spoiler, your horse has to die at the end, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he does.
He dies at the end shortly before Arthur does. I think his name was McSadness. And now I just have a horse named Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel's the horse.
Yeah.
Michael Aiello wrote in and said, "Hi, Colin and Chris. How do you feel about the mechanics behind hunting? Specifically, the need to use particular ammunition, weapons, and hit areas to retain the quality of the initial materials. I wish the developers either held all animals as equal or abandoned the mechanics that reduced pelt quality. The complexity of these interacting systems often dampened my fun. Thank you for all the work you do." I got to be honest with you that the hunting and fishing systems were so deep that if I didn't have to do them outside of a mission, I never did them. That's why I think I had the original satchel. I was holding the normal amount of ammunition, which didn't really cause a problem for me until the very end of the game. And I just didn't really care to participate in that because it seemed so vast. It almost seems, you know how there's like hunting games, like Cabela games every year and stuff? It seemed like it was just one of those just shoved into the game, like it's a whole different game.
Yeah.
And I just didn't mess around with it.
I hunted a lot, actually. I hunted quite a bit, specifically because I wanted meat to be able to cook and restore my health at any given point. I wanted to have as much meat as I possibly could. So I did fish a decent amount of times. I did hunt. I personally really enjoy the hunting mechanics. I do think the degradation gets a little irritating, especially with the lack of fast travel. But I also think the fact that fast travel is fast travel is ironically cumbersome. It's actually kind of hard to fast travel.
It's super annoying. The load times are long,
yeah,
and you have to go to very specific places. There are 2 different ways to fast travel in the game.
Yeah, you have the map on Arthur's camp.
Yeah, like his little
tent set up. You have a map that you can fast travel to from anywhere, but you can't fast travel to that location from anywhere. And you have stagecoaches that let you go to any of the major cities with stagecoach stations.
Chris wrote into us, not you. You didn't write in. Another Chris wrote into us and said, "Hi, Colin and Chris. Just subscribed specifically to ask this question all the way from the Queen's own Windsor in England."
Ooh.
Thank you, Chris. "I've listened to some people say that they get the best out of the game. You have to play it in long play sessions, and that short bursts can limit enjoyment. Given that most people with responsibilities don't have the time to play in such long sessions, has Rockstar shot itself in the foot? Do games that require 100 plus hours and long play sessions run the risk of limiting their reach? And does this affect your opinion of Red Dead Redemption 2? No, because you make the game as you make it, and it's already at 20 million units sold or whatever. Yeah. So I don't think that.
Well, I think it does limit it in the sense that it's definitely not going to sell as much as Grand Theft Auto, just by the nature of that. the fact that it is a very slow burn, the fact that the pacing is very deliberate, the fact that it is a very niche kind of game. Like, you don't really see Wild West video games ever, if at all. The last one that I could think of is Red Dead Redemption. And the one before that, Gun? Maybe?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of them, so I think it does limit it in a sense, but I don't think it's necessarily because it takes a long time to get into, because of course there's JRPGs that take way longer to get into that are selling just fine. So
yeah, I mean, there's just not that many games that are like this and that take advantage. You know, Call of Juarez and all these games that tried to be something Western. This approaches a level that's, I feel bad. I know you're playing Fallout 76 now, and I know a lot of people are complaining about it. I don't want to talk too deeply about it. We'll leave that for the normal episode of Sacred Symbols. But I imagine, as I've said in the past, that every open world game from here on out is going to suffer a great deal because of this game.
Yeah, hopefully CD Projekt Red can nail it.
Ethan wrote in about the fast travel system, which I wanted to read. He said, "Howdy, misters. I'm almost done with the story, and at first I thought it was slow. It wasn't until about 10 hours in that I realized how brilliant the game truly is. I was annoyed at first at the very limited use of fast travel, but then it suddenly dawned on me that this game doesn't want you to fast travel. It wants you to be slow and soak in everything. I saved the guy from a bear trap, and literally 30 hours later, he bought me a gun." That's what Chris was saying earlier. "This is hands down the most immersive open world game I've played, and I feel firmly believe that this game sets a precedent for what a living, breathing world in a game should feel like." I wanted to read that, Chris, just because he does talk about fast travel, and it is one of the games, like, I hated God of War's fast travel system. I hated it. I thought it fucking sucked.
Oh, yeah, it was awful.
But there was no reason to limit my ability to fast travel in that game because I wasn't getting anything really out of going around these kind of limited areas. In Red Dead, there's so much conversation and so much happenstance that fast traveling, I really started fast traveling later because fast traveling is actually expensive early on, especially if you use carriages. But once you have money, it doesn't really matter anymore.
And I think, again, that was our time crunch,
right?
More or less, talking.
But I just loved riding and getting off the road, and just, I would go as the crow flies almost just to see if I can get to a point without staying on the road and stuff. So I don't know. I would have liked a better fast travel system for it to be optional, maybe just on the map, like Assassin's Creed games do or Ubisoft games do. But I respect that they didn't want you to fast travel, and I wouldn't blame people for never fast traveling in the game. It's not like Fallout. Like, there are people that accidentally played Fallout 3 without ever fast traveling, not knowing that you could. Which I always think that shit's funny, but there's so many reasons not to fast travel in this game. If you have time, as we were saying earlier, it is a time commitment, but you're not going to get an experience out of any other video game like you got out of this. I'm not saying it's the best video game ever made, because I don't think that's true.
No.
But it is an achievement in video games that will not be surpassed anytime soon. And to your point, I think Cyberpunk is maybe the next game that will have the opportunity to do something like this in a meaningful way. All right, let's take a couple more questions and to wrap things up, if we might. I want to talk about the future, because one of the categories I put here on our planning doc was about the future. Michael Dunlap asks, "Hello, Chris and Colin. My question is, do you think that there will be single-player DLC? And if so, what would you like? Would you want to see an Undead Nightmare type?" Undead Nightmare, for people that don't know, is the original Red Dead Redemption's very well-received single-player DLC. Or would you prefer maybe DLC featuring a different playable character, such as John Marston? I can tell, by the way, that you didn't play it to the end when you wrote this question.
Yeah.
I think what I said at the top is true. I don't think, and I think they might have already said it, but I don't know. I don't think we're going to get single-player DLC.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that they could have very easily made Marston's entire segment DLC and released it next year and been totally fine and gotten away with it. And they didn't. And I think that that's really cool. And so I think that the support from here on out is going to make sure that the main game works fine. I saw a typo in the credits, which was astonishing for me, which I thought was really funny. So they'll patch these little things that don't work, but I think all of their resources are going to go into Red Dead Online. And presumably, because this is an interesting thing, Chris, and I think a lot of people might not know this, this is the first Rockstar game ever made that was a collaborative effort between every one of their studios. Typically, Rockstar North or Rockstar San Diego or whatever, Rockstar San Diego was largely responsible for the original Red Dead, for instance. This was a collaborative effort. And so I think that a team will segment off and deal with Red Dead Online, and I assume it's entirely possible that the entire team moves on to Grand Theft Auto 6 at this point.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would be actually genuinely shocked to hear anything about single-player DLC for this game, just because there's so much single-player in it already. Playing a game like this almost really shines a light on how unfinished a lot of games tend to feel, because this feels like you got way more than you paid for. This game.
My God.
It's insane.
This is one of those examples. I know people don't like hearing it, Chris, but I like talking about the extension of pricing from free to play all the way to a game that could cost a couple $100. It's about justifying what you get. And I think the idea that this game costs $60 is so funny to me, because this could have been, Rockstar could have been like, we're not charging $60 for this game. Yeah. And you'll see. The first game I ever said that about was Witcher 3, where I was like, they could have probably gotten away with charging even $80 for this WB and CD Projekt. So I like that they gave not only a lot of really high quality stuff, but did it at a budget. I'll tell you this, you're never going to get a game like this at this price ever again. There's just no way that that's possible.
Yeah, it would be shocking, to say the least.
And most studios, by the way, would never get away with putting this much time and effort into a $60 game. That's another thing that's really important to say. They have a capital stream, a revenue stream so strong from GTA Online. They can easily get loans if they needed them. They sell all their classics. GTA 4 probably still sell copies. They have all this revenue coming in where they're like, we can take our time. We're going to take 7 years. We're going to have over 1,000 people working on this game, as you saw in the fucking credits. And that's, by the way, only people that were at Rockstar when the game was finished. People that leave Rockstar during development are not in the credits of their games, which is hardcore. And the fact of the matter is that they made all their money back, including marketing costs, in the first day. And
it's insane.
They did it charging a very, very reasonable price, you know? And it's so funny, man, because you can tell that a lot of people, I mean, I didn't know that I was going to play as John Marston until like 3 days ago. So you can tell that, you know, it almost is like The Last of Us when you don't know that you're going to play as Ellie, you know? And so I don't know, man. I'm excited about this game. And I guess what I want to close with is, do you feel, and I think we talked about this a little bit at the top, but just, is this your game of the year? Is this the best game of 2018 pound for pound for you? Because we've had Detroit to a lesser extent, but we've had God of War and we've had Spider-Man and a few others. We're playing Hitman, we're playing Fallout 76, we're playing Spyro. I'm curious where you kind of stand right now.
I think it is. I think there's just, the value proposition is so high. The amount of effort that was put into this shines through. It feels like a benchmark game. And it feels like, again, it's the first time in a long time that I felt like, yeah, this justifies new hardware. Like, because as great and as enjoyable as Spider-Man was and as impressive as God of War was, I didn't get the sense that experience couldn't exist on prior hardware. I just didn't get that experience. Maybe God of War with the single camera, but that's about it. Like, everything else, I could easily see that being on a PS3 or running on a PlayStation 3. This, though, just like the AI interactions and just like the draw distance and just the systems that interlink with one another that are somehow inexplicably not completely broken. The fact that the game is as polished as it is with that long of a single-player campaign. The fact that the entirety of Red Dead Redemption 1's map is in the game and you never come across it in the single-player story unless you feel like exploring it is insane to me. That is nuts. When I found out that you could go down to McFarland Ranch, that you could go down to Fort Mercer, that you could go down to Armadillo, I was speechless. Because I'd never seen that before. The level of commitment to consistency in that universe is beyond anything I've seen prior.
It is the most elegant and fully realized symphony of elements that make a game that I've ever seen in my entire life.
I think as a video game, I had, probably had a little bit more wacky fun with Spider-Man. I enjoyed my time quite a bit with Spider-Man. It was the perfect length. There's a lot to like about it, but this is just like something else that I have a tough time describing, to be honest. I don't know how I would describe this to someone.
I think it's going to supplant Detroit for me, and I think it's got to be looked at through the prism of an experience. Because I agree with you, Spider-Man was expertly executed and the perfect length and had the perfect amount of content. I really loved how it was like 25, 30 hours, you're done. And
yeah,
you could probably do it in less than 20 if you really wanted to. And maybe it's because I'm 34, maybe it's because I run a business. We're adults, we have things to do. Yeah. I don't have time to play games like I used to, unfortunately. But I found the time, although it took us a little longer, I found the time to play this game. And I just think it's so symphonic and so impressive. And like you said, the attention to detail and the commitment to get this thing right. To make sure it all worked. Yeah. And I'll just reiterate what I said on normal episodes of Sacred Symbols, this whole fiasco about 40-hour work weeks. You do not make games like this without passion, without the willingness to go the extra mile, without the willingness to sacrifice. You don't get games like this if you don't leave it all on the field. You don't. So we can complain about all that stuff if you want, about people willingly throwing their all into this. This is the result. This is on their resume for the rest of their lives. And I assume anyone who worked on this game is going to be able to write their ticket at another studio if they want to.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to end on that note, on that overly aggressive note.
It's quite aggressive.
You know, and the people that wanted to get all in the mud about that kind of stuff, well, look at the result. Look at the result.
Over a misquote, also.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't even
Over a
It
misquote.
wasn't even valid.
In which case, the average person was working like 45 to 50 hours a week. But, you know, beyond that, I just feel like, hey, you work hard, you put it all on the line, you leave it all out on the field, you can get something like this. And this game is going to put other open world games to shame over the next year and a half or 2 years. And if I were working on an open world game right now that is 50% complete, 75% complete, and alpha, whatever, I'd be a little nervous. And if I were, you know, if I worked on Fallout 76, I'd be a little nervous.
It's jarring because I just started playing it, and it's, man, I gotta get used to it. I gotta get used to the fact that I'm not playing like masterpiece level.
Yeah, you gotta take a step.
Tier.
You gotta take a step back, you know. And
yeah.
So I just want to give the biggest and brightest shout out to the teams at Rockstar that put this game together, that fully realized and executed on something so expert and so interesting and so playable and so immersive. It's an experience. It's not a 10-hour campaign. It's not something you put away. It's not something you play over a weekend. It's something that I think is going to stay with people. And I'm really happy to be a video game player and to know that this is what our medium is capable of. Is it one of my favorite games of all time? I don't think so. But we're looking at it from the objective point of view. Mega Man 3 is my favorite game of all time. There's no objective measure by which that can be quantified or not.
Yeah.
So I just give a shout out to them. I hope everyone really enjoyed it. And I hope that I think we did handle this Spoilercast in a more effective way than we did the Spider-Man one. So hopefully, people enjoyed this. We got fewer letters read, but we actually talked about the game as opposed to just going through the letters. So
yeah, I think we did a good job.
I think so too. So Chris, thank you for taking the time to come over on an off day.
Of course.
To record this. I'm glad that we're done. Now we can move on and play other games that we want to play. And that was one of the exciting things. Was I did feel a little bit of relief when the game was over, because I'm like, and then I put Tetris Effect on because I'm like, I can play. I'm liberated.
I felt that too, but at the same time, like, I was also like, I do want more though.
No,
there was a point where I was like, this is so good.
It really is.
I was like sad that it was over, but relieved that I didn't have to crunch for it anymore.
It's a two-sided coin, as it were.
Yeah.
Double-edged sword. So thank you all out there for listening. Remember, you can get every episode of Sacred Symbols ad-free and 3 days early on patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. Doing so is essential for the success and the continuation of our show, so please consider it. Remember, all the letters we read on this show, too, come from Patreon supporters. It's the only way you can interact with the show. So if you have a few dollars to throw us each month, please consider it. If you listen on free feeds, that's totally fine with us. Hope you enjoy it there, too. Leave us nice reviews where you can on iTunes, etc. And we'll see you next time for a normal episode of Sacred Symbols. Until next time, goodbye.
Take care, guys.
Yeehaw! Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is fan-supported over at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. The following names are at the producer level or higher on Patreon, and I want to thank you from the very bottom of my heart for your incredible kindness and generosity. Sean Battershall, Martin Beck, Fred Bentz, Michael Betts, Eric Bishop, David Blodel, Mark Boggio, Spencer Brand, Isaac Brewer, Lennon Brixey, Matthew Brousseau, Josh Bushing, Austin Bullock, Dylan Burns, Alex Cabrera, Brian Cacciatolo, Will Caldwell, Luis Cancato, William O'Carroll, Matthew Carter, Brian Chan, Travis Chandler, Sean Chandler, Kenneth Charr, David Chestnut, Simon Conception Jr., Brad Cooley, Cutter Crow, Nick Cummings, Daniel Diamore, Daniel Delanikos, Travis Depew, Mitchell Durkash, David Ellis, Albert Escobar, Brian Fink, Joe Finelli, Eric Finkenbeiner, Stefano Fontana, Photios Frangos, Connor Gajian, Alexander Gates, Michael Gates, Salem Ghanem Al Ghanem, Daniel Glassford, Tyler Goodwin, Josh Gravelick, Ryan Greenwood, Miranda Grubba, Andres Guzman, Tyler Harris, Nathan J. Henry, Wyatt Henry, Asa Haas, Zahn Isa El Ricey, Josh Yeager, Paul Joyce, Greg Juliffs, Jeremy Key, James Kinslow III, Ryan R. Kittredge, Taylor Christian Laudrin, Christian Larson, Donald Laws, Joe Lawson, Don Q. Lee, Ashlyn Lee, Anthony Lencioni, Patrick Leslie, Dustin Lewis, Keith Adrian Lewis, Chad Lewis, Mark Liberto, Aaron Litwiller, Lou and Ray Loper, Colin Love, Josh M., Kiet Mai, Ryan T. Mandel, Peter Mark, Joe McPartlin, Wyatt McVeigh, Dennis Minchin, Andrew Mendoza, Albert Miranda, Patrick Malloy, Betty Ann Moriarty, Abe Mukhtar, Brian Nietzsche, Josh Netzel, Jonah Newman, Adam Nix, Brian Ott, Jorge Palomino, Todd Paxton, Marius S. Peterson, Enrique Perez, James Perrone, Eric A. Peterson, Jason Pettit, Matthew Plaster, Lawrence F. Prokop, Eric R. Pryor, Michael Renner, Peter Reynolds, Jonathan Rice, Toby D. Riemenschneider, Austin Riley, Petro Rose, A.G. Rowe, Matthew Savoy, Hans Schierenberger, John Schultz, Chris Schaefer, Michael Shanholtz, Toby Shootman, Joshua Smallwood, John Tabanillo, Ahmad Tamar, Ben Thompson, Carl Tallman, Gabble Toombs, Tam Tran, Dan Vale, Adam Van Kuren, Oakley Waldron, Justin Wagaman, Dade Michael Edward Wendt, Mike Wayne, Tyler Woodall, Corey Wyatt, Tony Zuniga, Random Guy Radio, Mad Mock Media, Casual Misfits Gaming, Supershot ST, Throw7, Infinite, Beric, Mubarak, Richter86, Dab9834, Donk2015, and Gavin.